It takes just one temptation to condemn a person. Any person, including Saint Benedict, a giant in Catholic history and the father of Western monasticism, and even considered as the father of Western civilization. But he also went through tough times, and once he faced a temptation that nearly got the better of him. But this story isn't just about Benedict, it's about all of us and the temptations we face. No matter how good we try to be, temptations can and will sneak up on us. But St. Benedict's story isn't just a warning. It is a source of hope. It proves that we can hold our ground even when sin tries to lure us in. His triumph from so long ago gives us clues on how to beat our own challenges. In this video, we are going to look at how St. Benedict stood up to the temptation and how his victory gives us hope and advice for living a life true to God. So let us follow St. Benedict's lead, using his wisdom and God's help to guide us. After the story, I'm going to take my magnifying glass and we are going to do some detective work to find out what saved St. Benedict from falling into this terrible sin. Now let's zoom in on that moment of the life of St. Benedict. A story that shows us the dangers of sin, but also the power of grace. It was an ordinary day in which St. Benedict found himself in solitude and in prayer. Suddenly, a small black bird began flitting around his head. He could have easily caught it, but he sensed that this bird was a foreboding omen of a spiritual trial that lay ahead. Saint Benedict made the sign of the cross as a shield against any lurking evil, and instantly the bird vanished. It's a clear sign that a more severe challenge was imminent. Soon after, an intense temptation struck him with an extraordinary force. The image of a woman he had once glimpsed came to mind, planted there by the evil spirit to test his virtue. This temptation seemed to come from within himself rather than external sources, and it was relentless in its assault on his soul, threatening to undermine all that he had built through prayer, fasting, and self-denial. Her memory ignited such a fierce longing within him that he even considered giving up his monastic vocation. Can you imagine that? I had known this story of St. Benedict, but as I was preparing this video, I realized the seriousness of this temptation. He, the great St. Benedict, actually considered abandoning his vocation. And with this, he would probably have abandoned his own salvation and be condemned for all eternity. Can you imagine what was at stake here? As I mentioned before, he was the father of Western monasticism. Now, what does that mean? He was one of the first to bring together all those lone hermits of the desert and propose a life in community. These hermits would do all kinds of penance, like fasting. They would scourge themselves, wear hair shirts. But he told them that living in a community under obedience was a far greater penance than fasting or scourging themselves. He taught them a way of life that in a certain sense was easier, but at the same time holier and more pleasing to God. So this man who transformed monastic life also transformed society. The golden age of faith has its roots in the Benedictine order. It was St. Benedict's spiritual sons who would evangelize Europe and convert the peoples and their rulers. And yet, all of that would not exist if he had abandoned his monastic life. So let's get on with the story. So he was considering abandoning his monastic life, his vocation. Now, what could save him from this? Was it something he could do, or did he make a great effort to think of something else? Nothing of the sort. It was grace. Assisted by divine grace, he came to his senses And what did he do upon coming back to reality? Spotting a thicket of nettles and briars, he acted without second thought. He threw himself into the prickly bush without protecting his skin. The pain was intense as he rolled among the thorns, but as he emerged from this self-imposed penance, his physical wounds ended up strengthening his soul. Now, this act of penance fortified Saint Benedict, leaving him more resilient than ever. His faith remained unshaken, and he was well prepared for any future temptations. And this experience taught him the extent one must go to combat the darkness that seeks to trap us, revealing an inner strength that surpasses human limitations. Saint Benedict's fight for chastity is a potent reminder of the constant struggle that we all face. But you who are listening to this story, you must be thinking, what does Saint Benedict's attitude have to do with what I'm going through? It surely doesn't mean that I have to go rolling through a thorn bush. That's too extreme, isn't it? All right, it's time for the magnifying glass. We have to understand that not everything that a saint does should be imitated without adaptation. But everything that happens in a saint's life has an important lesson for us to avoid condemnation, especially in a great saint like Saint Benedict. When Saint Gregory told the story for the first time, one who was listening asked him what was its hidden meaning. Saint Gregory replied that when a person is in his youth, the devil takes advantage of the person's natural inclinations to push him towards sins of the flesh. And the fact that Saint Benedict rolled in the thorns means that in our youth, we must discipline ourselves, make a routine for ourselves, and live as much as we can with people who can help us to practice virtue, and above all, to embrace suffering. The thorn bushes in our lives are the persecutions we suffer for our faith, the misunderstandings from fellow Catholics, and our own weaknesses, and 1,000 other daily worries. When we encounter difficulties like these, we must throw ourselves into them and thank God. And all these little thorns end up distracting us from the desires of the flesh. Nevertheless, this is not the most important part of this episode. The most significant thing about the whole story is that he, Saint Benedict, received the grace from God to come to his senses. His passions made him blind to his commitment, his dedication to his vocation, and his mission. The only thing that can save a person from this is grace. Now you may have this objection, but brother, if grace is the only thing that can save me from temptations such as these, then whatever I do doesn't matter, because if I fall into the temptation, it will be because God did not give me the graces. So I wouldn't have any fault, right? Not so fast. Where's my magnifying glass? Oh, here it is. Let's take a look at the beginning of the episode. Remember that small black bird that appeared out of nowhere? What did Saint Benedict do? He made a sign of the cross. He was vigilant and observant, expecting the enemy to pounce on him at any moment. So he immediately implored the help of heaven by making the sign of the cross. He had a habit of praying and always praying, and because of that, God gave him the grace. We can attract grace by prayer. If we don't pray for grace, we are at fault. If we pray for grace, God will grant it, but we have to correspond to the graces we receive. And so we should ask for the graces to correspond to the grace. Now, there's another way to attract graces. It is by making use of sacramentals. When we use a sacramental, we are actually praying, and we are reminding God that we belong to Him. And a sacramental is like a reminder for God to grant His grace and protection. By the way, there is a sacramento that especially invokes protection against the devil and his temptations: the Saint Benedict Medal. And in the near future, we are going to pray a novena to Saint Benedict, in which we will talk about this medal. Father Timothy Ring will lead us in this novena, and it is open to all, so don't miss it. When grace knocks at your door, let grace in, because it may not come around again. Saint Benedict grabbed the opportunity when grace hit him. He had to hurt himself, but God rewarded him with a miracle. He never had another temptation against purity. He came out more robust and more disposed for the fights he had ahead of him. And there were many. He even had a fight with his own sister, Saint Scholastica. Now what? 2 saint siblings fighting? That's something. You know what? I'll make the next video about this amazing fight. So amazing that Saint Scholastica even used her supernatural powers against Saint Benedict. Oh boy, I gave away too much already. See you in the next video. Salve Maria.